A Marine on leave drives through the snowy mountains until he finds a police car flipped, blood in the snow, but no bodies. Moments later, a woman's scream cuts through the storm. She's holding a baby surrounded by wolves. What begins as a rescue becomes a war against betrayal, corruption, and the fight to protect a child marked by evil. What begins as a rescue becomes a war against betrayal, corruption, and the fight to protect a child marked by evil. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and the miracles God hides in the darkest places. The Cascade Mountains slept beneath a sky of iron. Snow blanketed the pines in silence, and the wind carved through the forest like breath from an ancient beast. Ryan Cooper drove slowly along the narrow mountain road, his truck's tires crunching over frozen gravel. He had taken this route countless times during training years ago, yet tonight it felt heavier, as if the weight of winter itself pressed upon him. He wasn't here for duty, not anymore. The war had ended, at least for everyone except him. His leave from the SEALs was meant to bring peace, but solitude had become another battlefield. The rhythm of the windshield wipers matched the pulse in his temple, steady, hollow, relentless. He thought of his teammates, some buried overseas, some broken by memories that refused to die. He had learned to live with ghosts, though they still spoke in the quiet. In the passenger seat, Shadow sat alert, head high, ears twitching at every groan of the forest. The German shepherd had served beside Ryan for 5 years, surviving 2 missions where no one else had. The dog no longer barked at thunder or gunfire. He simply watched, waiting. In his amber eyes lingered the same restless vigilance that haunted his master. Ryan reached over, resting a hand briefly on Shadow's neck. "Easy, boy," he murmured. "Just snow and wind, nothing more." But even as he said it, he didn't believe it. The world rarely offered nothing more. The headlights sliced through a curve ahead, glinting off metal. Ryan frowned, easing the brake. A shape emerged on the roadside, a vehicle overturned, half buried in snow. He pulled over, engine rumbling low, and stepped out into the freezing air. The storm bit his face, sharp and immediate. As he approached, the letters on the car door became clear. Police, Jackson County. His gut tightened. The windshield was shattered, the siren light cracked, wires still faintly glowing beneath frost. A dark smear led from the driver's side door into the drifts. Blood, still wet enough to glisten. He crouched, running a gloved finger through the snow, then froze. No body, no footprints nearby except one small set, barely half the length of his boot. A child? No, too straight, too deliberate, someone carrying something. Ryan's instincts flared alive, trained senses piecing together the scene like fragments of a forgotten briefing. There had been a struggle, a crash. Someone escaped or was dragged. He circled the vehicle, flashlight sweeping over broken glass and an abandoned service pistol. A police badge lay in the snow, stained dark around the edges. He picked it up, brushing off frost. Brooks S. The name stirred nothing, yet something inside him clenched, an echo of training, of rescue ops where badges like this meant the same thing. Someone still out there, someone waiting to be found. Shadow whined softly beside him, nose pressed to the blood trail. "Yeah, I see it too," Ryan whispered. The wind howled louder, carrying faint sounds that might have been trees cracking or something else entirely. He stared into the tree line. Darkness swallowed everything beyond 10 yards. He returned to the truck and retrieved his rifle, a weapon he hadn't intended to use again. The familiar weight steadied him. He and Shadow followed the faint path, boots sinking into fresh powder. Every breath came out as mist. The trail wound downhill, then veered sharply left where the trees thickened. Ryan's pulse slowed, instinct taking over, the same calm he'd felt before storms of gunfire. Yet beneath that calm was unease. Whoever crashed the cruiser had survived, at least long enough to leave footprints. And whoever bled that much wouldn't last long in this cold. Shadow stopped suddenly, ears pricked. Ryan knelt beside him, listening. The forest held its breath. Then a sound, distant, human. A voice strained through the wind, faint but unmistakable. A scream, high, desperate, and full of fear. It cut across the valley like glass shattering. Ryan's chest tightened. That scream didn't belong to someone fighting. It belonged to someone pleading. He exchanged a glance with Shadow. No words were needed. The dog bolted first, leaping through snowbanks, and Ryan followed, rifle low, boots pounding the frozen earth. The scream came again, closer this time, then was swallowed by the wind. Branches whipped his shoulders as he ran. The forest blurred into shades of white and gray. Somewhere ahead, something was happening, something cruel and urgent. Ryan's training had taught him to approach slowly, assess, call for backup. But there was no backup. An instinct screamed louder than reason. He moved faster, each stride carrying him deeper into the unknown. His breath burned, his heartbeat echoed against the trees, and in the distance the faint sound of a child crying cut through the snowstorm. He stopped for just a heartbeat, raising his head toward the sound. The cry twisted into silence, leaving only the roar of wind. Ryan whispered, "Hold on, I'm coming." Then he disappeared into the storm, Shadow close behind, the snow closing their tracks as if erasing their existence. Snow whipped sideways through the trees as Ryan sprinted toward the sound. The forest seemed alive. Branches groaned, wind howled, and beneath it all came another cry, raw and close. He and Shadow burst through the thicket into a small clearing where moonlight bled across the snow. What he saw forced him to stop mid-stride. A woman was backed against a rock ledge, one arm pressed protectively around a bundle of cloth. A baby. Around her, half a dozen wolves prowled in a slow, hungry circle. The alpha growled low, hackles raised. The woman's breath came out in white bursts of panic, her free hand clutching a branch like a useless weapon. Ryan raised his rifle, steady, deliberate. "Shadow," he whispered. The dog's body tensed. A heartbeat later, the first shot cracked through the storm. Snow exploded near the alpha's paw, enough to scatter the pack's rhythm. Shadow lunged, barking deep and fierce. The wolves fled into the dark, leaving only the hiss of wind and the woman's ragged breathing. Ryan lowered his weapon and moved closer. "You're safe now," he said quietly, though he knew it wasn't true. Nothing in this place felt safe. The woman slid down the rock, cradling the baby tight. Her voice trembled. "Who are you?" "Ryan Cooper," he replied. "U.S. Navy SEAL, off duty. You're hurt." She tried to speak, but the effort made her cough. In the weak light, he noticed the dark stain spreading across her sleeve. She pressed a shaking hand to her shoulder, and blood leaked between her fingers. "They found me," she whispered. "I thought I lost them when the car went over." Her eyes darted toward the trees. "How did you find me?" "Your cruiser," Ryan said. "Back on the road." The woman nodded weakly. "I'm Officer Sarah Brooks, Jackson County Sheriff's Department. She said it like an oath, one that had already cost her more than she could afford. Her breath shuddered. "There's a baby! I see him," Ryan interrupted gently. "Let me help." He crouched beside her, unwrapping a small first aid kit from his pack. Shadow sat nearby, eyes sweeping the dark like a sentry. Sarah flinched when Ryan cut her jacket open to treat the wound. The bullet had grazed her shoulder, painful but not fatal. "You're lucky," he said, applying gauze. "I was lucky once," she muttered, voice distant. "Not sure it means much anymore." For a moment they sat in silence, the only sound the baby's faint whimper. Ryan glanced down. The infant's face was pale, lips trembling from cold. Without hesitation, he shrugged off his outer jacket and wrapped it around the child. "How long has he been exposed?" "Too long," Sarah answered. He's burning up. Fever started before the crash." Ryan frowned. "A fever in this cold? That's not—" "I know," she cut in, almost defensive. "I was taking him to a safe house. But someone knew. They ran us off. The road." Her words carried the weight of a confession and a warning. Ryan studied her face, not her features, but the exhaustion carved into them, the kind that comes from fighting too long alone. "You said they. Who are we talking about?" Sarah looked away. "People in uniform, the kind who don't wear their badges for justice anymore." She swallowed hard. "I reported what I found to my supervisor, an infant trafficking operation, hidden under state adoption transfers. The moment I sent the files, radio silence. 2 days later, my unit was gone. Phones cut. Then the ambush." Ryan absorbed her words without flinching. He'd seen corruption take many forms. Military contractors selling secrets, officers betraying villages for profit. It was always the same sickness under a different flag. "You did the right thing," he said. "That's why they're scared." Sarah almost laughed, but it came out hollow. Right doesn't mean alive. The wind rose again, scattering snow across their tracks. Ryan scanned the tree line. The wolves were gone, but something else felt wrong. Too quiet, too still. "We can't stay here," he said. "You're bleeding. The baby's getting worse. My cabin's not far. We'll be safe there for the night." Sarah hesitated. "You trust me that easily?" "I don't," he said simply, "but I trust the situation less." He lifted her gently, careful not to jar the wound. Shadow took the lead, nose to the wind. Each step was slow, deliberate. The baby whimpered once, then fell silent against Sarah's chest. Ryan's mind drifted to his own past missions, villages where cries like that had gone unanswered, where no one came. He pushed the memories aside and focused on the path. By the time they reached the ridge overlooking the frozen creek, Sarah's legs were shaking. Ryan guided her through the last stretch until the outline of his cabin appeared between the trees, a dark shape under the snow. Inside, the fire from earlier still smoldered faintly. He laid her down on the couch, took the baby to warm near the hearth. Sarah leaned back, eyes fluttering. "Why are you helping us?" "Because someone has to," he answered, "and because I've seen what happens when nobody does." He checked the window, half expecting headlights or movement. Nothing. Only snow falling, heavy and endless. Sarah stirred again, voice weaker. "They'll come, you know. Whoever they are, they won't stop until the baby's gone." Ryan met her gaze. "Then they'll find we're not easy targets." Shadow lifted his head suddenly, ears sharp, body rigid. Ryan followed the dog's stare toward the tree line beyond the cabin window. For an instant, he thought he saw something. A flicker of movement, the shadow of a figure slipping between trees. He stepped closer, squinting into the night. Nothing moved now, only snow. But Shadow kept growling, low and certain. Ryan whispered, "Someone's out there." Sarah's hand tightened on the baby's blanket. "Then you'd better keep that fire low," she said, "because they already know where we are." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying faint footsteps that faded into the blizzard's howl. The storm had quieted by dawn. Gray light filtered through the cabin window, spreading across the wooden floor like thin smoke. Ryan sat beside the dying fire, his eyes fixed on the baby sleeping near the warmth. The child's breathing was uneven, his skin slick with fever. Sarah slept on the couch, her wounded shoulder bandaged in fresh cloth. She had talked through the night, half conscious, her words painting fragments of a story too grim to fully piece together. Stolen children, hidden facilities, officers paid to stay silent. Ryan didn't want to believe it, but something in her voice, the exhaustion of someone who had lost everything, made denial impossible. Shadow lay by the door, head on his paws, still tense even in rest. He had spent most of the night growling at the forest beyond the cabin walls. In war, Ryan had learned to trust the dog's instincts more than any radar. Shadow didn't relax for no reason. When Ryan's phone failed to find a signal again, he realized they were completely alone. A faint cry stirred him. The baby's fever had worsened. Ryan took a damp cloth, wiped the child's face, and froze. Near the left shoulder, under the thin layer of skin, was a small, round swelling. He pressed gently. Something metallic shifted beneath the flesh. "Damn it," he muttered. Sarah's eyes fluttered open. "What is it?" she whispered. He met her gaze. "You said they were tracking you?" She nodded, already guessing. "That's how they find the children. Each one of them has a chip, an ID they can't remove." Ryan grabbed a knife and heated it over the flame. "If that thing's active, they'll know where we are." Sarah struggled to sit up, weak but resolute. "You can't just cut it out. It's deep, close to bone." "We don't have a choice," Ryan said quietly. He worked fast, precise. Years of field medicine taken over. The baby cried out once, then fell silent as Ryan dropped a tiny silver shard onto the table, the tracking chip, still blinking faintly red. He crushed it with the butt of his knife. Sarah watched in silence, tears slipping down her cheeks. "They'll know the signal's gone," she whispered. Ryan wiped his hands on a rag. "Then we move before they come." The words had barely left his mouth when Shadow rose sharply, growling deep from his chest. The sound was low, warning, primal. Ryan snatched his rifle and moved to the window. Through the trees, something moved, shadows shifting against the pale snow. "They're already here," he said. The first bullet shattered the cabin window. Wood splinters flew. Ryan dropped to the floor, dragging Sarah down. "Stay low," he barked. Shadow leapt toward the back door, barking thunderously. Another shot punched through the wall. Ryan crawled to the corner, returned fire. 1, 2 burst into the tree line. A scream followed, distant but real. He turned to Sarah. "Take the baby, back door. There's a ravine 50 yards east. Follow the creek." "What about you?" "I'll slow them down." Sarah wanted to protest, but one look at Ryan's expression stopped her. She wrapped the baby tightly in her coat and ran, crouched low. Shadow hesitated, torn between duty and instinct. Ryan met his eyes. "Go with her. Protect them." The dog bounded after Sarah without a sound. Ryan reloaded and waited. The footsteps came closer, cautious, professional. Whoever they weren't amateurs. He could hear radio static and short commands. "Target inside, 2 exits neutralize fast. He smiled grimly. That was the language of trained killers, not law enforcement. He fired again, emptying a magazine toward the sound, then slipped out through the side wall he'd reinforced years ago, a hidden escape route from his old survival drills. The snow was blinding outside. Ryan moved fast between trees, circling back toward the creek. Every movement sent pain through his shoulder. Blood had soaked into his jacket. He'd been grazed, maybe worse. Behind him, the cabin roared as a grenade tore through the doorway. Flames burst against the snow. He didn't look back. Ahead, Sarah was struggling through drifts, shadow at her side, the baby crying softly. Ryan shouted, "Keep moving!" A bullet slammed into the tree beside his head. He turned, fired blind, and kept running. They reached the creek moments before another explosion rocked the forest. The blast threw Ryan to the ground. His ears rang, his vision blurred. He tried to stand, but collapsed, pain burning through his ribs. Sarah knelt beside him, breath ragged. "You're hit." "I'll live," he said through clenched teeth. "You need to go." "I'm not leaving you." He almost laughed. "You said the same thing to your partner once, didn't you?" Her eyes widened. He'd read her perfectly. She had mentioned hours before that her partner had died covering her retreat during the first ambush. The guilt had never left her. Now faced with the same choice, she shook her head violently. No, not again. Ryan tried to protest, but Shadow barked sharply, not at them, but at the ridge above. A figure appeared, dark against the snow, aiming down. Sarah dragged Ryan behind a fallen log as gunfire ripped through the clearing. Ryan returned 2 shots, forcing the shooter to duck. "There's more coming," he gasped. "If they take you alive, the baby's gone. You hear me? Gone." She hesitated, then pressed her forehead against his. "You better not die here." "Wasn't planning to." He pushed her gently. "Go." Sarah turned, clutching the baby, and disappeared into the woods with Shadow covering her flank. Ryan stayed behind, firing until the last round clicked empty. He heard voices closing in, then silence. The forest seemed to breathe again, calm after violence. He slumped against the snow, the cold creeping into his veins. From somewhere far away came the faint echo of the baby crying and Shadow's bark fading into distance. When he finally opened his eyes, the world was gray. Smoke rose from the direction of his cabin. 2 figures approached through the haze, one in black tactical gear, another in a long coat. The man in the coat crouched beside him. "Ryan Cooper," he said, voice steady, almost familiar. "You should have stayed out of this." Ryan's vision swam, trying to place the voice. Then the man lifted his head, revealing a scar across his cheek. Jack Turner, his former SEAL teammate. For a moment, Ryan forgot the pain. The betrayal hit harder than the bullet. Jack looked down at him with a cold smile. "You and I have unfinished business." Ryan tried to speak, but everything went dark. The night had surrendered to a dull gray morning when Ryan woke to the sound of dripping water. His head throbbed, his vision blurred, and when he tried to move, chains bit into his wrists. The damp air smelled of pine and rust. A cabin, but not his own. He was sitting against a wooden post, surrounded by flickering lantern light. Through the haze of pain, he saw him, Jack Turner, standing near a table covered in files, maps, and a small radio transmitter. The man looked older, heavier in the shoulders, but the sharpness in his eyes hadn't changed. Ryan remembered those same eyes scanning enemy terrain years ago in Kandahar. Back then, Jack had been the one to pull him out of a collapsed tunnel. Now, he was the one who dragged him into another kind of darkness. "Still breathing," Jack said, his tone calm, almost nostalgic. "You always were too stubborn to die." Ryan's voice came rough, dry. "You've changed, Jack?" Jack smiled faintly. "No, you just stopped understanding." He walked closer, dragging a chair across the wooden floor. "You think this is betrayal," he said, sitting down, "but it's survival. After everything we gave them, after all the years of service, what did we get? Paper medals and empty promises." He pointed toward the radio. "These men, they pay for loyalty. Real loyalty." Ryan met his gaze, cold and steady. "You're selling children." Jack's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "You call it selling? I call it redistributing. The world's rotten, Ryan. Families pay to save one kid while thousands rot in shelters. The government lets it happen. I just filled the space they left behind." For a long moment, neither spoke. Ryan could feel the old brotherhood between them, once forged in gunfire, now corroded by greed. "You're lying to yourself," Ryan said quietly. "We fought to stop people like this." Jack rose, his expression flickering with something like guilt before hardening. "You still believe in good and evil? You really think any of that matters now?" He turned away, speaking more to himself. "I tried to quit once. You know what happened? They killed my wife, burned our house, left me with nothing but this choice." That silenced Ryan. He had known Jack's wife, gentle, kind, the only light Jack had after the war. If that story was true, it explained the hollow look in his old friend's eyes. But understanding didn't mean forgiveness. "You had a choice," Ryan said, "and you made the wrong one." Before Jack could respond, the cabin door creaked open. A man in a sheriff's uniform stepped in, brushing snow from his sleeves. His badge caught the lamplight. Sheriff Clay Monroe, a name Ryan remembered hearing on Sarah's radio before the crash. Monroe carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. His eyes were the kind that didn't blink at cruelty. "He awake?" he asked. Jack nodded. "He'll cooperate." Monroe smirked. "He better. The woman's already on her way here." Ryan stiffened. "Sarah?" Monroe chuckled. "Yeah, brave little cop. Thought she could play hero. My boys picked her up near the ridge last night. Dog tried to stop them. Shame about that mutt. Took 2 rounds before it went down." Ryan's blood turned to ice. He pulled against the chains until his wrists bled. "You touch that dog again." "Relax," Monroe interrupted. "If she talks, maybe I'll let her live long enough to watch the kid get a new name." Jack turned sharply. "Enough, Clay." Monroe frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I said enough," Jack repeated, louder this time. For the first time, Ryan saw hesitation in his old friend, the fracture of loyalty. Monroe noticed it too. "You going soft, Turner? Don't forget who's paying you." Jack stepped forward, voice low but lethal. "You forget who taught me how to shoot." Tension hung in the air like the smell of oil before an explosion. Monroe laughed, brushing past him. "You two can sort out your soldier drama later. I'm taking the woman to the pit. She's got information we need." He tossed a blood-stained envelope onto the table. "That's her file. Clean up this mess after." Then he left, the door slamming against the wind. Jack didn't move for a long time. Finally, he spoke without looking at Ryan. "I didn't order that. The dog, I didn't want that." Ryan's voice was flat. "You never do. You just let it happen." Jack turned, fury flashing in his eyes. You think I enjoy this? You think I wanted to end up running guns for people I hate? Then stop, Ryan said simply. Help me get her out. Jack hesitated, torn between guilt and fear. You don't understand what they'll do to me. Ryan leaned forward, his voice a whisper like steel. You already lost your soul, Jack. What else can they take? The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of wind rattling the window shutters. Somewhere in the distance, a faint gunshot echoed. Perhaps Monroe enforcing his will. Jack closed his eyes as if weighing every sin he'd ever justified. Then, without a word, he unhooked the chain from the wall. If we die, it's on you, he muttered. Ryan stood slowly, his body weak, but his resolve sharper than ever. Wouldn't be the first time. Jack handed him a small knife and motioned toward the back door. We'll take the service road to the pit. If she's still alive, that's where Monroe's holding her. Ryan paused, hand gripping the weapon. And the baby? Jack's gaze shifted. Monroe keeps his deliveries in the trucks near the pit. If you're lucky, you'll find him before the shipment leaves. Ryan nodded once. There was no time for forgiveness, only survival. As they stepped outside, the cold hit them like a wall. Snow drifted down, covering old tracks. Ryan felt the weight of every decision pressing on his chest, the war that never really ended, the brother he couldn't save, and the woman he refused to lose. They moved through the forest in silence, two ghosts bound by memory and guilt. When they reached the ridge, Ryan spotted smoke in the valley below, a clearing surrounded by old mining equipment. Shadows moved near the firelight, men, trucks, cages. His jaw clenched. That's it, Jack said softly. Ryan turned to him. You help me get her and the kid out, and maybe you'll get to live with yourself again. Jack gave a short, bitter laugh. You still think redemption's real? Ryan looked down the slope, eyes cold as steel. We'll find out. As they began the descent, a single howl rose from the far woods, low, distant, unmistakable. Ryan froze. Shadow was alive, and he was coming. The wind cut through the trees like a whisper of ghosts. Ryan and Jack crouched behind a fallen pine, the old mining pit stretching below them. Dozens of figures moved between floodlights, armed men loading crates into trucks, engines rumbling like beasts in their cages. Ryan could see Sarah in one of the tents, wrists bound, her face half-shadowed but alive. Near the trucks, a small bundle lay under a tarp. The baby. Rage simmered beneath his ribs, mixing with the dull ache of his wounds. Beside him, Jack adjusted the rifle sling, silent, calculating. For a long moment, neither spoke. The years between them felt heavier than the snow. Ryan broke the silence first. You said you wanted redemption, he muttered. Here's your chance. Jack didn't look at him. You think one good deed wipes out everything? I've buried more than you can imagine. Then stop burying, Ryan said. Start fighting for something that matters. Jack's eyes flicked toward the clearing. You always were the idealist. Ryan gave a faint, humorless smile. And you were always the realist. Let's meet in the middle. They moved out like ghosts, slipping through the snow toward the pit's perimeter. Ryan's body ached with every step, but adrenaline burned away hesitation. He could hear Monroe's voice echoing from the center, issuing orders with the calm of a man who thought himself untouchable. Near the tent, two guards stood chatting. Jack signaled, and in a breath the silence broke. A chokehold, a muffled thud, and both men were down. Ryan slipped inside the tent, knife ready. Sarah turned, eyes widening with disbelief. Ryan?" He pressed a finger to his lips and cut her bindings. "We don't have long." The baby, "I know," he said. "Jack's getting him." She stared at him, startled. "Jack? He's here?" "Long story," Ryan replied. "One I'll tell you if we live through this." Outside, a gunshot cracked. Then another. Ryan grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her out into chaos. Men shouted orders. Lights swung wildly. He saw Jack darting between trucks, baby in arms, moving faster than any man his size should. Ryan's chest tightened at the sight. Jack wasn't saving himself. He was saving what mattered. They regrouped behind an old bulldozer. Jack passed the child to Sarah, breath ragged. "You get him out," he said. Ryan frowned. "What about you?" Jack shook his head. "I'll draw them off. Monroe still thinks I'm on his side. Maybe I can buy time." "Jack, don't argue, Coop. You taught me how to fight clean. Let me in dirty." Before Ryan could stop him, Jack stepped out into the open. Monroe spotted him immediately, shouting, "Turner, where's the target?" Jack raised his hands, playing the part. "You were right, Clay. He's here, but you've got bigger problems." Monroe's eyes narrowed. "What the hell are you—" The explosion cut him off. Jack had thrown a grenade beneath the nearest truck. Fire ripped through the night, scattering men like startled crows. Ryan grabbed Sarah and the baby, running for the ridge as bullets snapped through the air. Jack's voice echoed behind them, fierce and defiant. "You want redemption, Coop? Take it and go." Halfway up the slope, Ryan turned. Through the smoke, he saw Jack firing into the chaos, covering their escape. Monroe advanced, revolver in hand, shouting orders. Then the two men collided, one final clash between old brothers. Ryan couldn't see who fired first. The blast lit the night, followed by silence. He didn't stop running. Neither did Sarah. When they finally reached the tree line, Ryan collapsed behind a boulder, lungs burning. Sarah held the baby close, whispering a prayer through tears. From below, flames licked the sky, and the sound of gunfire faded to nothing. Minutes passed before a faint rustle came from the woods behind them. Ryan raised his weapon, ready. Out of the darkness emerged Shadow, limping but alive, his eyes fierce as ever. He staggered to Ryan's side and pressed his head against his hand. Ryan swallowed hard. "You made it," he whispered. Shadow gave a weak bark as if saying, "I told you I would." Sarah smiled through exhaustion. "He followed the smell of gunpowder," she said softly. "He always finds you?" Ryan nodded, looking back toward the burning pit. "We lost Jack." Sarah's voice trembled. "He knew it would end that way." "Yeah," Ryan murmured, eyes distant. "He always did." They sat in silence as the fire consumed the valley. Somewhere in the distance, sirens echoed faintly, the kind that came too late to matter. Ryan thought of Jack's last words, of the man he used to be. Maybe there had been a fragment of the soldier left after all. When dawn finally came, the snow was red in places, black in others. Ryan helped Sarah to her feet. "We need to find shelter. Someone will come looking." Sarah nodded. "What now?" Ryan looked down at Shadow, who stood guard despite his wounds. "Now," he said quietly, "we finish what they started." The wind shifted again, carrying the smell of smoke and iron. Far below, near the edge of the pit, a figure stirred amid the ashes. One hand, burned and trembling, reached for a weapon. Sheriff Monroe wasn't dead, and he was coming for them. The forest was silent when the sun began to rise, its pale light washing over the wreckage of the night before. Smoke curled from the valley like a dying breath. Ryan stood on the ridge, his clothes torn and burned, watching the last remnants of fire flicker through the pit below. Sarah held the baby close beside him, her face streaked with soot, exhaustion, and relief that hadn't yet turned into peace. Shadow rested at Ryan's feet, limping but unbroken, his eyes scanning the tree line for a threat that hadn't yet come. For the first time in years, Ryan allowed himself to believe it was over, but peace, like dawn, never lasts long in the mountains. A gunshot cracked through the stillness. Ryan turned, instinct taking over, shielding Sarah and the child as a bullet shattered a branch behind him. Down in the haze, Sheriff Monroe stumbled out of the smoke, his uniform blackened, his left arm limp and useless, his face twisted by both pain and pride. Somehow, he had survived. He limped forward, shotgun in hand, shouting through the echoing woods, "You think you can burn it all and walk away, Cooper? You have no idea who you're fighting." Ryan motioned for Sarah to move back toward the old ranger cabin perched beyond the slope. "Get inside, now!" She hesitated but obeyed, clutching the baby tightly. Shadow growled low, his ears pinned back. The sound wasn't rage, it was resolve. Ryan picked up his rifle, checked the single remaining clip, and exhaled. The final fight had found him, as it always did. Monroe stepped into the clearing, coughing smoke. "You cost me everything," he spat. "Turner's dead because of you. The operation's gone. The money's ash. But I can still take something from you." His shotgun clicked. "Let's end this the way it should have started." Ryan didn't answer. He moved sideways through the trees, using the fog as cover. His mind wasn't in the present. It was back in the desert, another firefight, another brother dying beside him. He remembered the promise Jack once made. If we make it out, we don't die for orders, only for something worth dying for. This, he realized, was it. The air smelled of wet pine and gunpowder. Ryan circled wide as Monroe advanced, each step heavier, slower. The sheriff was bleeding badly, but hate was keeping him upright. When he fired, the blast tore bark inches from Ryan's shoulder. Ryan rolled, returned 2 shots, one grazing Monroe's side. The older man grunted, stumbled, but didn't fall. "You're a soldier," Monroe said between breaths. "You fight for ghosts, for a system that's already rotten." Ryan's voice was quiet, steady. "Then I'll burn the rot out myself." Monroe laughed, bitter and raw. "You can't save her. You can't save the kid. You couldn't even save your own men." That last line cut deep. Ryan froze for a heartbeat, enough for Monroe to raise his shotgun again. But before the shot came, a blur of movement hit from the side. Shadow, wounded and furious, slammed into Monroe's legs, knocking him off balance. The gun went off, the sound deafening in the cold air. Ryan dove forward, tackling Monroe as the weapon skidded away. They rolled through the mud, fists and fury replacing tactics. Monroe was older but strong, his rage giving him power. He slammed a fist into Ryan's ribs, snarling, "You think you're righteous, Cooper? You're just another killer in a cleaner uniform." Ryan struck back, his knuckles cracking against Monroe's jaw. "Maybe," he said through gritted teeth, "but at least I know who I'm fighting for." The sheriff drew a knife, swinging upward. Ryan caught his wrist, twisting until the blade turned. Pain flared across his hand, but he didn't stop. With one final surge of strength, he forced Monroe's arm down, driving the knife into the man's chest. The sheriff gasped once, eyes widening with disbelief. His grip loosened, and the fight ended as suddenly as it had begun. Monroe slumped backward, staring at the pale sky. "You'll never stop it," he whispered. "It's bigger than me. Bigger than you." Then the light left his eyes. Ryan sat there for a long moment, breath clouding in the cold. The silence that followed felt almost sacred, the kind that comes after years of noise. Shadow limped to his side and pressed his head against Ryan's shoulder. The soldier's hand trembled as he stroked the dog's fur. "We're done, buddy," he murmured. "We're finally done." Sarah appeared from the tree line, the baby quiet in her arms. She stopped a few feet away, staring at Monroe's body. "Is it over?" Ryan looked toward the valley, where smoke still rose from the burning pit. "Not yet," he said, "but it will be." They made their way down the slope to one of the overturned trucks. Ryan rummaged through the wreckage until he found a small steel box, the same kind used for confidential records. Inside were dozens of USB drives and photographs, babies, officers, transaction sheets. The evidence was there, damning and undeniable. Ryan handed it to Sarah. "Get this to the FBI in Portland. Don't trust anyone local." She hesitated. "What about you?" He smiled faintly. "I'll keep the trail cold." By mid-afternoon, rescue helicopters thundered over Cascade Ridge. It wasn't luck. Sarah had managed to radio for help through a broken transmitter she'd scavenged from the truck. The agents that arrived wore black jackets with FBI printed in bold white across their backs. Their leader, a quiet man named Agent Miles Crawford, introduced himself with calm authority. He had the look of someone who'd seen corruption up close and was tired of watching it spread. He listened to Sarah's story in silence, then nodded. "We'll take it from here," he said. Ryan gave his report, every word measured. Crawford studied him carefully before saying, "You've done enough, Lieutenant. Go home." But home was a word that no longer meant anything. Ryan looked toward the tree line where Shadow waited, tail low, eyes steady. "We'll try," he said simply. As the agents moved to secure the site, Sarah placed the baby into Ryan's arms one last time. The child stirred, eyes blinking open, small fingers clutching at his sleeve. "He'll never know what happened here," she whispered. "Maybe that's mercy." Ryan nodded. "He'll know what matters, that people fought for him." Before boarding the helicopter, Sarah turned back. "What will you do now?" Ryan glanced at the horizon, where the smoke had thinned and sunlight broke through. "There's always another fight," he said quietly. "But maybe now it's worth choosing the right ones." Shadow barked once, as if agreeing. As the helicopters lifted off, the valley below shimmered with the first clear light of day. Snow fell gently over the wreckage, covering the blood, the fire, and the ghosts left behind. Ryan stood with Shadow beside him, watching until the last rotor faded into silence. For the first time in years, the soldier didn't feel lost. He felt ready to live. And as the morning wind swept across Cascade Ridge, it carried with it the faint echo of Jack Turner's voice. A memory, a promise, a farewell. "You can't save everyone, Ryan, but save the ones who still can be." Ryan smiled faintly at the sound and began walking down the ridge, Shadow limping at his side toward whatever waited beyond the snow. Sometimes miracles don't come with thunder or light. They arrive quietly, in the heartbeat of a child saved, the loyalty of a wounded dog who refuses to give up, or the courage of a soldier who chooses to protect rather than destroy. In a world that often forgets kindness, faith still breathes in the small, defiant acts of love we give to one another. Just like Ryan, Sarah, and Shadow on Cascade Ridge, each of us carries battles unseen, fears, grief, guilt. Yet somewhere between pain and grace, God places His hand. He reminds us that redemption is never too far, that even in the darkest winters, light still finds a way through. So, if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment about where you're watching from, or tell us about the shadow in your life, the loyal soul who stayed when others left. And if you believe, as we do, that every act of compassion is a whisper from heaven, subscribe to our channel, join this growing circle of faith and love, and may God bless you and your family, keep you safe, and guide your steps through every storm toward His light. Amen.